The following presentation provides information from the City of Asheville for agencies wishing to apply for federal home and CDBG funds. CDBG funds may only be used to benefit residents of the City of Asheville, while home funds may be used to benefit residents of Buncombe, Henderson, Madison, and Transylvania County. Applicants for funds must be a consortium member government, nonprofit agency, housing authority, for-profit entity applying through a member government, or a community housing development organization. All applicants must demonstrate a track record of continuous, active, and relevant operation for the last 2 years. In general, all projects must benefit persons with a household income below 80% of the area median income, adjusted for family size. Detailed application instructions are provided on the City of Asheville's Community Development website, along with the application documents. This presentation will cover the application process, available city staff, consolidated plan priorities, funds available, eligibility requirements, changes to the home rule, required application forms, and contracting procedures. At the completion of this presentation, you should have a general sense of the purpose of the grant program, the types of activities that are eligible for funding, how to get help from our staff, and how to submit a complete application. This year, there are 4 steps to apply for CDBG or home funds through the City of Asheville. As the first step, this webinar will provide information about the city's funding priorities, strategic plan, and specific requirements for CDBG and home funding. A questions and answers page has been established on the City of Asheville's Community Development website. Applicants are encouraged to submit questions to CD staff before submitting their application. Questions that may be beneficial for all applicants to see will be posted anonymously to the Q&A section. On January 6, we invite you to drop in between 10 and noon to meet our staff, ask specific questions about the grant programs, or get help with your application. Additional time will be available to discuss more detailed technical assistance questions for existing grant holders. Come to the 6th floor training room of Asheville City Hall. RSVPs by email are appreciated but not required. Applications for funding are due Friday, February 5th by noon at the latest. Applications received after noon on the 5th will not be accepted. Please email your completed application to cdapplications@asheville.nc.gov. Get to know the community development staff. Each grant project is assigned a project manager from our staff who will work with you to draft your contract, review draw requests for compliance with grant agreements and contract deliverables, and provide you with technical assistance and monitoring of your program. Staff will be available at the drop-in technical review meeting to answer questions. From left to right, Jeff Staudinger is the Assistant Director of the Community and Economic Development Department. Jonathan Jones is the Administrative Assistant and Continuum of Care Coordinator. He can assist applicants with completing their application and withdrawal requests. Shannon Capizzelli is the Community Development Specialist. She can assist applicants with CDBG grant questions, draw requests, and help with applying. Heather Dillashaw is the Community Development Manager. She can assist with questions about eligibility and funding priorities. Christiana Glenn Tugman is the Community Development Analyst and Homelessness Lead. She can assist with questions related to homelessness and tenant-based rental assistance projects. Tara Irby is the Outreach Coordinator. Chris Natton is a Community Development Analyst. He can assist applicants with home grant questions. Marvin Feinblatt is the Community Development Financial Analyst. He can assist with questions about budgets and draw requests. Sandra Anderson is the Community Development Analyst. She can assist applicants with compliance questions. Contact information is available at the end of the presentation. The City of Asheville is a federal entitlement community under the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Community Development Block Grant Program and serves as the lead entity and participating jurisdiction for the Asheville Regional Housing Consortium, which designates home funding. Every 5 years, the City of Asheville must produce a 5-year consolidated plan to establish eligible funding priorities for the use of home and CDBG funds. This plan is drafted with the assistance of the Asheville Regional Housing Consortium Board and the City of Asheville Housing and Community Development Committee. The overall goal of the plan is to develop resilient communities by providing decent housing, promoting a suitable living environment, and expanding economic opportunities, particularly for low and moderate income persons. The consolidated plan can be viewed on the City of Asheville's Community Development website under the Plans and Reports page. To accomplish these goals, the consolidated plan has established specific priorities which your program must address in order to receive CDBG or home funds. Priorities are grouped by housing, economic development, or public facilities priorities. Housing priorities for Asheville, Buncombe, Henderson, Madison, and Transylvania County includes providing affordable rental housing for households earning 60% of the median income or less, providing affordable and accessible housing to persons with special needs, including the homeless, persons with criminal records, the frail elderly, persons with mental illness, and people with disabilities, including intellectual and developmental disabilities, and victims of domestic violence, and to help people succeed through support services coordinated with housing development. Coordinating housing development with transportation, jobs, and services, and making efficient use of available land and infrastructure. Promoting homeownership for low-income households. Incorporating sustainability into housing and community design. Preserving existing housing and focusing preservation efforts to make both rental and ownership housing affordable and preserve long-term affordability of rental housing. Asheville has the additional priority of targeting low-wealth neighborhoods for improvements that will improve housing conditions and create stronger communities, and Madison County has the additional priority of increasing local capacity to produce affordable housing. Economic development priorities have been determined for use in the City of Asheville through the CDBG program. These priorities include creating sustainable jobs for low-income persons, providing job training and placement for persons who have been disenfranchised from economic opportunity, including those with disabilities, supporting startup and growth of small and micro business, especially among minority populations, supporting services necessary for employment, improving food security and healthy food availability in food deserts, and supporting productive collaborations and seeking to reduce the duplication of services. Public service priorities include providing needed services that directly support affordable housing and increased employment opportunities, ending homelessness, supporting the provision of housing for persons with disabilities including mental illness and intellectual and developmental disability, supporting youth mentoring, after-school education, and other services as part of neighborhood revitalization. Public facilities priorities include supporting the development and improvement of community centers that provide job and business training, education, and other community services, developing infrastructure that will strengthen existing neighborhoods and making them sustainable by connecting to jobs, education, and services, and developing multimodal transportation facilities and services that reduce reliance on private vehicle travel. Each year, HUD allocates a specific amount of funds to the CDBG and Home program for Asheville. In addition to this annual allocation, the City of Asheville also allocates funds from revolving loans and reallocated funds. The exact amount of funds available for the year is not known until after the application due date, and sometimes the amount available is not known until after funding decisions are made. This can result in a slight increase or reduction in funding amounts for selected programs. Based on the 2015 grant amounts, we anticipate slightly over $900,000 each for the CDBG and Home program. In addition to meeting one of the consolidated plan priorities, your program must be eligible based on CDBG or Home requirements. For CDBG funds, some types of construction projects may be eligible, but most CDBG funds go towards non-construction programs. These funds can only be used in the City of Asheville in order to benefit Asheville residents. For the Home program, all funds must go towards housing activities. This includes construction projects, tenant-based rental assistance, down payment assistance, and pre-development loans for community housing and development organization certified projects. Funds can be used anywhere within the four-county consortium area, which includes Buncombe, Henderson, Madison, and Transylvania County. The purpose of the Community Development Block Grant Program is to support the development of viable communities by providing decent housing and a suitable living environment, and expanding economic opportunities primarily for persons of low and moderate incomes. To be eligible for CDBG grant funds, your activity must meet one of the 3 national objectives, which includes benefit to low and moderate income persons, the prevention or elimination of slums or blight, or meeting an urgent need such as disaster issues. At least 70% of all CDBG funds must be spent on activities benefiting low to moderate income persons, and at least 51% of your program participants or beneficiaries must be low to moderate income persons. CDBG funds have some flexibility and may be used for a wide variety of eligible activities, including real property acquisition, economic development, public services, housing rehabilitation, planning, and many more. While your project may be an eligible activity in general, there are limits on what CDBG funds can be used to pay for. For example, ineligible uses of funds include purchasing equipment or furnishings, operating or maintenance expenses, and income payments to individuals. Only 15% of CDBG funds may be used to fund public service activities. If $1 million in CDBG funds is provided by HUD, that means that only $150,000 is available for public service projects, plus the addition of program income from the previous year. Some examples of eligible public service projects include domestic violence services, housing counseling, legal services, senior or youth services, and workforce training. CDBG funds used for economic development activities are not subject to a cap like public service projects. To receive CDBG funds for economic development, your project must create or retain jobs or businesses. Funds are available for job creation, technical business assistance, job training in connection with job creation, and microenterprise loan assistance. Additional activities may be available for CBDOs, which are community-based development organizations. CDBG funds used for public facilities may go towards the acquisition, construction, or rehabilitation of facilities including streets, sidewalks, child care or senior centers, parks and recreation facilities, and facilities for abused or neglected children. Funds may not be used for the maintenance or ongoing operation of a facility. CBDO stands for a Community-Based Development Organization. This type of organization status is granted to agencies that engage in neighborhood revitalization, community economic development, or energy conservation. A CBDO must be organized to engage in community development activities within a specifically identified geographic area. For example, a census tract within the city of Asheville that has a population over 70% low to moderate income is eligible for special types of eligible economic development activities by a for-profit or nonprofit CBDO organization. To apply for CDBG funds, your agency must be either a public or private nonprofit agency, a neighborhood association partnered with a nonprofit agency, or a city partnership project such as a new playground, or a for-profit entity applying for an economic development activity that meets a HUD national objective. The purpose of the Home Investment Partnership Program is to strengthen public-private partnerships and to expand the supply of decent, safe, sanitary, and affordable housing. A primary focus of the program is on rental housing for very low and low-income families. Home-eligible activities include new construction for homeownership or rental, rehabilitation of existing units, tenant-based rental assistance in the form of rent, security deposit, or utility assistance, direct homebuyer assistance such as through down payments, and administrative and planning costs. Home funds may be spent on projects occurring in Buncombe, Henderson, Madison, and Transylvania County. All activities using home funds must produce affordable housing or make existing housing affordable. Funded programs must show the number of units produced and the number of low to moderate income households assisted. In addition, home funds must be matched 25% by non-federal sources. While providing matching funds will make your application more competitive, the consortium has generated a large surplus of match credit from prior years, which may allow some flexibility in your match requirement. The HOME program considers housing to be affordable when it serves households with incomes below 60% of the area median income and costs the residents no more than 30% of their gross income for housing costs. This is true for both homeownership and rental programs. To apply for home funds, you must be either a member of one of the 4 county consortium governments, a for-profit or nonprofit organization with a member government endorsement, or a community housing development organization, otherwise known as a CHODO. CHODO organizations must be nonprofit agencies, governed according to HUD guidelines. They must demonstrate sufficient staff and financial capacity to run the program and have a history of serving the community within which the new affordable housing will be located. CHODOs must own, sponsor, or develop affordable housing. Housing units created with home funds are subject to a minimum period of affordability. The time period that a unit must remain affordable depends on the type of unit, for example, rental versus homeownership, and the amount of home funds invested in the unit. For example, homeownership assistance in the amount of $20,000 would require a minimum period of affordability of 10 years. Home requirements are updated annually by HUD. City staff stay informed of these changes to ensure that your project remains in compliance and will work with you to troubleshoot if issues arise. Applicants should be aware that home funds invested in projects that are not completed within 4 years of the commitment date must repay the home grant with non-federal funds. Home funds may only be committed to a project after the project has been underwritten, the developer capacity and fiscal soundness has been assessed, the market conditions have been examined to ensure the success of the development, and a firm commitment has been received for all project funding sources. Community development staff will review your application in light of the home rule, including HUD's ongoing guidance for compliance. Some examples of the home rule include the requirement that any homeownership unit that has not been sold to an eligible buyer within 9 months of construction completion must be converted to a home-assisted rental unit. Rental units must be leased to households at 60% AMI or less. Finally, home buyer written agreements for ownership units contain a recapture provision. For more information about the home rule, you can visit the following links on this slide. A link is provided to both the full home rule as well as a link outlining just the most recent changes. While city staff are available for technical assistance, every applicant is expected to be familiar with the requirements of the home rule when using home funds. Now we will review the application process and important documents to be familiar with. To access the application and instructions, go to the Community Development webpage on the city's website and navigate to the Funding Programs page. All applications must be submitted electronically either as a Word or a saved PDF file. Please do not send a paper copy. Applications are due no later than Friday, February 5th by noon. Applications received after this day and time will not be accepted. If you have questions about filling out the application, please contact our staff with sufficient time to receive a response before the deadline. You should email your application and all attachments to cd@asheville.nc.gov. If your attachments are too large to email, you may email a link to a Dropbox folder. We will post any questions that we receive onto the city's website under the Application Materials section. Don't worry, your questions will be posted anonymously and are meant to help others who may have a similar question. The application and instructions contain live links to resources that you can view if you need more information about certain topics. There's also a timeline in the instructions which shows important dates for the application process and funding decisions. The first page of the application contains a checklist that should be reviewed prior to submitting your application. Keep in mind that the instructions are separate from the application. If you have questions not covered in the instructions, feel free to call or email us. There are two types of applications to choose from. The first is the construction application for projects such as new construction, rehab, or emergency repair. The second is the non-construction application for projects such as public services or TBRA. Applications are based on the type of project you're doing, not on which funding source you're applying for. For example, some types of construction are eligible for CDBG funds, so you would complete a construction application for that grant request. Whether you choose the construction or non-construction application, you'll be required to provide detailed information about your program, organization, finances, proposed use of the grant funds, and the beneficiaries of the program. Please complete all sections of the application. If a question is not applicable, make a note of that in the application. Application questions are designed to help city staff and committee members determine the eligibility of the program, the capacity of the agency to achieve its stated goals, impact on beneficiaries, and how the program aligns with existing city priorities and strategic plans. The application also asks for data to support the local need for your program. Section 2F of the application asks for outcome information about your program, while Section 2G asks for output information. Outcomes refer to the measurable results of your program for your beneficiaries. Outputs refer to the number of people served. For example, 100 people receiving financial counseling is an output. 80 of those counseling recipients showing financial literacy on a survey as a result of the counseling is your outcome. This information is used to distinguish between services provided versus benefits actually achieved as a result of those services. When reporting your beneficiaries in Section 2 of the application, you'll be asked to list either the number of people you plan to serve or the number of households. It's important to report your beneficiaries correctly based on HUD's requirements for your activity type. As a general rule, all CDBG-funded programs should report beneficiaries in persons served, whereas home programs should report households served. There are some exceptions to this rule. For example, if you're doing a home ownership assistance or other housing program using CDBG funds, you will report households served instead of persons. Also, all housing services grants that receive CDBG funds must report beneficiaries as households. This is because housing service grants can only be used to support a home-funded housing program. The beneficiaries reported in your housing services grant must match the household beneficiaries reported for your home grant. If you aren't sure whether you should be reporting in persons or households, please ask city staff. Section 2 of the application requests additional information about your project, such as your timeline, how you're collaborating with other agencies to reduce the duplication of services, the eligibility of your beneficiaries, and what specific services you'll provide using the grant funds. Housing services applicants are asked in Table 2C for information about the home-eligible project that would be supported with a housing services grant. Housing services can only be awarded in conjunction with a home grant. Section 3 of the application asks for financial information about your agency and how you specifically plan to use grant funds. In addition, there are 3 financial attachments to review before submitting your application. All applicants must complete Attachment A, which is your agency and program budget. The first tab asks for your agency revenue and expenses as a whole. The second tab asks for the budget of the program that you're requesting grant funds to support. This tab requires that you list your previous program revenue sources and expenses, your proposed program budget for the grant year, and a separate column to break down the specific proposed uses for the grant funds. The third tab asks for information about staff costs. Complete this tab whether or not you plan to use grant funds to pay for personnel costs. The fourth tab asks for information about expected program income and CBDO or CHODO proceeds. Many types of activities will not generate program income, so ask a city staff member if you have questions about filling out this tab. Applicants doing rental housing or rehab development will also need to complete Attachment B. If you're doing homeownership development, you will complete Attachment C in addition to Attachment A. Section 4 and 5 of the application requires information about your organization, such as the number of staff members and information about your board. The purpose of this section is to get a sense of who your agency is and how it's being run. As the participating jurisdiction for HUD, the City of Asheville is responsible for ensuring that grant funds are used by eligible organizations for eligible activities. Your application helps us to determine whether your agency and program are a good fit for the use of CDBG and home funds, and whether the program will help address a local strategic plan priority. This section also requests a disclosure of any potential conflicts of interest and an explanation of those potential conflicts. Funded agencies should be aware of HUD's requirements for program income. This is gross income received by your agency that's directly generated from the use of home or CDBG funds or from matching contributions. Some examples of program income include proceeds from the sale or lease of real property, acquired, rehabbed, or constructed, principal and interest payments made on loans that you provided, proceeds from the sale of loans, interest made on program income, and any other interest or return on investment. Program income can be complicated, so speak with a member of our staff for help identifying potential program income. Specific requirements for the use of program income by your agency may apply. Applications for construction projects require additional information about their project in Section 2, including acquisition and site details, information about the proposed housing and construction plan, affordability, marketing plan, infrastructure, and support services for clients. In addition to answering all questions, applicants are required to submit their site plan, a general location map, floor plans, elevation drawings, and additional documentation. Due to the amount of information requested, applicants should plan to begin their application as soon as possible. For most home projects such as new construction, emergency repairs, and rehab of existing structures, your application should report program targets and outcomes counted in number of households instead of number of persons. Some exceptions to this include projects that have an area-wide community benefit, such as public infrastructure projects or the construction of public facilities. Other projects which serve a special population or have a specific area benefit may require that outcomes be reported in both households and number of persons. In addition to home and CDBG regulatory requirements, there are other federal requirements that apply to funded programs. Federal requirements addressed may include non-discrimination and equal access, employment and contracting, environmental requirements, lead-based paint, relocation assistance for displaced persons, and many more. The list in this slide represents some of the most common federal requirements that you should be familiar with. To view the full list, please see the Code of Federal Regulations. An environmental review is the process of reviewing a project or activity and its potential environmental impacts to determine whether it meets federal, state, and local environmental standards. Not every project is subject to a full environmental review, but every project must be in compliance with NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and other related federal and state laws. Federal environmental regulations must be completed and certified before any choice-limiting actions occur. Environmental conditions must be evaluated, and you must have received clearance from City of Asheville Community Development staff, or you may not be eligible for CDBG or home funding. The time of compliance for environmental review starts at the time a sub-grantee applies or intends to apply for HUD funds. There are 4 levels of environmental review that your project will be evaluated for if you receive a grant. The 4 types are exempt or categorically excluded but subject to statutory checklist, full environmental assessment, an environmental impact statement. Most public service, economic development, and other non-construction programs will qualify under exempt or categorically excluded, meaning that there are no physical impacts or changes occurring as a result of the program. Categorically excluded but subject to the checklist refers to projects which are typically excluded but may have significant impacts for some reason. A project requiring a full environmental assessment would include new construction projects. A full ER assessment can take between 2 to 3 months to complete. Finally, an environmental impact statement is required for projects that have a known substantial environmental impact. Agencies receiving home or CDBG funds for construction projects are prohibited by HUD from making choice-limiting actions until after an environmental review has been conducted. Choice-limiting actions can include purchasing a building or lot, going out to bid for contracts, approving final design plans, starting physical work on a site, or signing a lease. During an environmental review, staff may find red flags requiring a more detailed review process. These can include things like sites located within a floodplain, near a railroad or airport, or in a historic district. Demolition of existing buildings can raise questions about lead-based paint and asbestos, among other things. Amendments to a previously approved scope of work can require an additional environmental review of your project. Typically, multi-year development projects also require more detailed reviews compared to single-year projects. Understanding what level of review your project may require can help you factor in the additional time required to complete the review. You've successfully submitted an application for CDBG and home funds. Now what? City staff will first review every application for completeness. Follow-up questions will be provided to agencies regarding missing documents, incomplete answers to questions, and clarification and additional information about their program. Applicant answers to staff questions will be used along with the application itself to inform staff funding recommendations. Agency applications and staff's evaluation will be provided to the HCD Committee for review of CDBG applications and to the Home Consortium for review of home applications. The HCD and Home Consortium will each hold a public meeting to determine funding allocations for the year. Agencies are assigned a time slot at these meetings in order to provide a short presentation about their program and answer questions. Funding recommendations are made live at those meetings. The following dates apply to both CDBG and home applicants. Prior to submitting your application, home applicants whose projects are located outside of the Asheville city limits must have approval from the jurisdiction for their project. A list of consortium member contacts is included in the application instructions. CDBG and home applications are due to the City of Asheville by noon on Friday, February 5th, 2016 by email. Applications will be reviewed by staff until March 2nd. The HCD Committee and Home Consortium will meet to make funding recommendations between March 15th to the 22nd. A draft action plan for the use of funds will be published on March 25th. On April 26th, Asheville City Council will hold a public hearing to approve funding recommendations. Once grant funds are approved by City Council, the action plan is sent to HUD for federal approval. City staff will work with your agency to begin drafting contracts during this time. Typically, drafts are completed for non-construction projects by July 1st, whereas construction projects may require more time. Once HUD approval is received and contracts are finalized, the City will provide you with the contract to obtain necessary signatures. Agencies may begin drawing funds once contracts are fully signed. CDBG programs may bill for expenses incurred since July 1st, even if contracts are not signed until a later date. Home programs may only bill for expenses incurred after contracts are signed. Detailed application instructions are provided for both the non-construction and construction applications for CDBG and home funds. Each application must include a recent audit or financial statement, organizational documents including bylaws, organizational chart, 501c3 determination letter, and board roster. Once a grant is awarded, applicants will be required to provide proof of insurance, a copy of their procurement policy, conflict of interest statement, and drug-free workplace policy. City staff will work with you to ensure that all required documents are obtained before important deadlines. Funded agencies must have the capacity to run their program according to their agreed-upon contract and to provide the City of Asheville with additional reports throughout the year. A standard request to draw funds from the city must be completed on city forms, which require budget breakdowns, demographic information for all clients assisted with the grant funds, narrative progress reports describing activities, and support documentation for all funds requested, which can include payroll registers and copies of receipts. Home programs will require additional documents, such as the TBRA setup form and housing production forms. In addition to the documentation required with all draw requests, some grant recipients must provide information for a number of other reports, including Davis-Bacon and Section 3, home closeout reports, and activity and funding summaries for end-of-year reporting. Finally, all funded agencies should expect to be periodically monitored by the City of Asheville or HUD for compliance. Monitoring can include a simple desk review by our staff or a more complex visit to your offices, where staff will review your grant files and standard operating procedures. Monitoring provides you with opportunities to make any necessary changes to keep your program in compliance. While all agencies receive ongoing monitoring of their progress reports throughout the year, most agencies can expect on-site monitoring every other year. Staff are also available to provide technical support upon request for any program needing additional assistance. City of Asheville staff are available to answer questions regarding applying for funds, eligibility, compliance, draw requests, and grant-specific questions. The following staff members can assist you with the CDBG and home programs. Don't forget, applications are due by February 5th at noon. Submit all applications by email and ask questions if you aren't sure about something.